I went to a boarding school that was haunted and it could be terrifying. I'll give a background before I tell you the encounters I had. I went to an all-boys boarding school from the age of 13, until just after my 18th birthday. My school was old, and I mean old. It was founded over 450 years ago, back in 1552. To put that in a little context for my American friends, that's 245 years before the USA was founded. With a place that old, it carries things. As you can probably imagine, I have a lot of stories from my 5 years of service at my school. Feel free to ask any questions. One last disclaimer, I am in no way a writer. So, I do apologize if this post comes out and makes no sense whatsoever. My first couple weeks at school were incredibly nerve-wracking. I had never spent more than a night or two away from home. So, I felt homesick and overworked, as I was getting used to my new work schedule. But I was making friends with some of the boys in my year and things were looking up. At this point, I was probably the smallest boy in my year. I hadn't hit my growth spurt yet, and I wouldn't for a couple more years. The older boys in our schoolhouse would tell us stories of how the school was haunted, and that we should never adventure alone past sunset. My friends and I did not believe them in the slightest. We assumed that they were just playing tricks on the new boys. But we were so wrong. I remember the first time something odd happened. I was quite under the weather and had a high temperature. This was within my first month of moving into the school. My teacher suggested that I should take a cold shower. It was late in the evening and showers were usually reserved for first thing in the morning unless you had peed that day. I remember feeling rather dizzy, and so my friend offered to accompany me. We went down to the shower room together. Having showers at my school was probably the most awkward thing I remember about my time there. One big open room, with a dozen or so shower heads. That was a tough thing to get used to when I first started, but I did get used to it rather quickly. I was never really shy about my body or anything like that. But still, there were at least 2.5 dozen boys in my schoolhouse. All crammed together in a completely open communal shower room. It was awkward to say the least. But back to the point, when my friend and I went down late in the evening. We placed our clothes under a shower head that wasn't going to be used by either of us and got in the shower. The hot water boiler would not have been on at that time in the evening, so my cold shower certainly was cold. After around 5 minutes of my friend and I standing in the freezing cold water, all at once, every unused shower turned on full blast. As well as that, the freezing water suddenly turned boiling hot. Like, red hot. I'm sure if my friend and I didn't manage to get out of the way of the water before it reached full temperature, we would have been burnt badly. We immediately made a run for the door of the shower room, but it was locked, and we couldn't get it opened. We started panicking, as you could imagine. 2 naked 13-year-old boys slamming on the shower door with all we could muster. Then almost as fast as they all started, the showers all stopped. I remember that my heart was racing like it had never raced before. I remember feeling as if I was drowning in steam from the showers. After that, the showers started spurting out something that looked like bright red blood, and I won't ever forget the smell, like rusty metal mixed with sewage. My friend and I were truly cowering at the door by this point. I'll speak for myself when I say, that was the scariest thing I had experienced up until that point in my life. Then again, the water stopped, and the door unlocked. Our clothes were truly ruined, along with our towels. My teachers were very strict, they could be downright mean. You did not want to be punished at my school. And that's what terrified us more in that moment. We were more scared of being sent to the headmaster's office than we were of whatever event just happened, paranormal or not. So we did our best to clean up. But it didn't work. The room still looked as if a bomb had been dropped. So we went to our head of house and explained what happened. He seemed confused, perhaps even slightly scared. He told us to go back to our dorm. The next day the shower room was closed, and we had to use another house's room. As I said, this was probably the first time I experienced something that I cannot explain. Whether it was paranormal or not, which personally I'm almost certain it was. How else would all the showers turn themselves on and the door lock itself? This is only one story from my 5 years at my school, and honestly this is one of the mildest. Second encounter. This takes place around 2 months after the last incident with the showers. It was the first Christmas holiday, and most boys were packing up to spend 2 weeks at home with their parents. My parents had already written to me and said they were too busy for me to come home, so I would be spending the holiday there. I have to admit I was disappointed, but I did as I was told. All of the friends I had made left for the holiday, so I was pretty lonely. But I was enjoying some rest time. For those of you who don't know how most boarding schools in Britain work, we had a 6-day week. We had normal lessons all day from Monday through Saturday, and on Sunday we had to attend a church service for the first half of the day. meaning we only got one afternoon off to rest in the week. So, I spent most of the time I was allowed in bed reading books. The weird things were more prominent when it was the holidays. It was as if whatever energies were there became braver when there were less people around. In my schoolhouse around 2.5 boys, but only 4 had stayed for the holiday, only one was the same age as me and none had stayed for my dorm room. Which I have to admit, I was thrilled about. Well, I was at first anyway. The first couple or so nights went fine. I was doing my 13-year-old boy thing and I won't go into any more detail about that. Lol. But after the first days of peace the weird things started again. At first it wasn't anything major. Echoes of screams and moans coming from the courtyard, but I rationalized as older boys playing pranks. But it did scare me. But I didn't want to appear weak or fall into their prank, so I slept through my fears and didn't ask any of the other boys to come and sleep in my dorm with me. So, I slept, and when I woke, every other bed in my dorm apart from mine had been moved to the far side of the dorm. Which thoroughly freaked me out, but again I assumed it was a prank from some of the older boys. And if it's one thing I had learned by this point, if you're being pranked or joked on in any way, show no weakness or it will keep happening. So, I moved all the beds back myself and went down for a shower. When I got down there was another boy already in the shower room. I can't remember exactly how old he was, but he was in the older years, so probably around 15/16. For this story, I'll name him Toby. By this point I was used to showering with others, so I didn't care that he was there at all. He told me his plan for sneaking down at night and breaking into the dessert kitchen and having a midnight feast. He asked if I wanted to join him, and though I had never done anything against the rules before, he assured me that he had done it loads and had never been caught. So, I agreed. Later that day, I got ready in a suit of all black to be able to sneak around more effectively. Toby was just wearing his normal clothes and looked at me like I was a huge nerd when I explained my reasoning for my clothes. And so, we started sneaking down to the kitchen. When we got there, we started eating as much ice cream as we could. When suddenly a whole shelf of tin food threw itself onto the floor, and the kitchen doors slammed themselves shut. I looked at Toby in a "what do we do?" kind of way. We picked up food and left almost as quickly as we came. Toby and I started walking back towards our schoolhouse. This is the bit that still gives me the chills. We heard footsteps coming up the hall on the way back. We assumed this would be a teacher, so we found somewhere to hide until they had passed. But no one came and we carried on walking back towards our dorm. This is when I felt something grab my leg and yank it. I got back up. We looked around us and there was no one around. We started running because we were both scared, when something yanked Toby's leg. He fell, and he fell way worse than I did and banged the front of his head and it gave him a bloody nose. He got back up relatively quickly. He was a rugby boy and was used to this kind of thing. By this point we were sprinting full speed back to our schoolhouse. We got back. We swore we wouldn't speak of what happened again out of fear of getting in trouble. I went to my dorm and tried to get to sleep, but I was terrified of what had just happened. After a couple hours of just laying, I managed to get to sleep. I woke up at some point in the night, to my bed along with the others in my dorm, being slammed into the far side of the room with force. At this point, I was completely over having my dorm room. I got up and went into Toby's dorm. I explained what happened in my dorm to someone I thought would understand me. He told me he knew what I was talking about and told me to make a bed in his dorm, and I slept in there for the rest of the holiday. On the plus side, Toby looked out for me during the time he was at the school and we still keep in touch now.